Hello and welcome to today's Mind Your Career webinar program. My name is Adam Sylvain and I work with the Alumni Career Development Team here at the University of Chicago in Hyde Park. I'm delighted to welcome you to our Career Month webinar entitled How to Build Your Career Plan. Today we will hear from law school alumna Amy Gardner. Amy is a certified career development and career transitions coach with Apochromatic. She helps attorneys and other professionals cut through distortions and distractions to decide where they want their careers and lives to go, and then develops the tools to get there. Whether that means helping clients improve and advance in their current role or moving to another, her goal is to help clients create a career and life they love rather than simply tolerate. Gardner's work draws on her unique experience working with law students as Dean of Students at the University of Chicago Law School and a successful career practicing law, first as a Skadden litigation associate and later as an associate and then partner at a mid-sized Chicago firm. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to cede the floor to Amy.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. So as Adam said, we're going to talk about how to build your career plan today. There we go. So we're going to talk about various aspects of planning, but one of the things I want to encourage you to think about is how you'll get where you want to go. And planning may or may not, a traditional career plan may or may not be the tool that you want to use to do that. So as Adam said, my name is Amy Gardner. I graduated from the law school, and I now coach attorneys and other professionals who either want to advance in their careers or want to make some sort of career shift. We do that through one-on-one coaching and then also work with small groups of attorneys and other professionals through our masterminds. And we also do trainings at employers around the country. So if you've ever Googled career planning, or if you read any of the career websites out there, you've probably been bombarded with headlines about career planning. They say things like, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Career planning made easy. One of my favorites that I just saw the other day on the Harvard Business Review website is that career planning is dangerous. What is your why? There's a big focus on your why, and I actually agree with that, and we'll talk about that as well. Adam, it looks like some people may not be able to see the slides. Is that right?
I'm not getting that feedback currently. If anybody is having issues seeing the slideshow, please do type in, but I can see and hear you, Amy. So
okay, good. Thank you. And some of the other career planning headlines that you might see are, if you don't start now, it's going to be too late. And what do you want to be when you grow up? And well, these are all fair questions. I just want to encourage you to not stress out and not make the effort focus on having the perfect career plan, and to instead focus on your career and to view career planning as a tool to help you build the career that you want. So we're going to talk about 7 career planning principles. Then we're going to turn to 9 steps that you can use to build what I refer to as a career map, which I think is a little more helpful than thinking about a career plan. Then we're going to talk about 8 ways that you can learn and grow, because one of the things that I often hear from clients is they just don't know where to start. So we're going to talk about 8 ways that you can start focusing on growing in your career. Then we're going to do an exercise so that you can jumpstart your career map. And then we'll talk about some next steps, some first steps that you can take to move forward. Before we do any of that, though, let's turn to a poll question. Adam, if you could put up the question that we have.
Absolutely, yep. So we're going to launch our first poll. This question asks you to describe yourself. So your 3 options here: new professional working 10 years or less, mid-level professional working for 11 to 20 years, or a senior professional working 21 plus years. I'll give folks joining us just a few seconds to register your responses, and then I'll share those out. All right, so it looks like we have a pretty good distribution here. 47% are mid-level professionals working for 11 to 20 years, 30% new professionals working 10 years or less, and 23% senior professionals working 21 plus years.
Great, thank you for doing that. So that's really helpful to me as I think about the examples that I share with you. But also we will have time at the end for any specific questions that apply to your situation. And as always, when I do these webinars, I know that there are always some people who have very specific questions they want answered, but don't feel great about sharing them with a few hundred people on a webinar. So you can also always email me, and I'll share my email address at the end, and I'm happy to talk through your specific situation with you. So I want to start with these 7 career planning principles. And the first one is that a traditional career plan doesn't work today. If you need a reminder why that is, why making a 6-month, 1-year, 5-year, or 10-year career plan or goal and then backing out from that doesn't really work, I want you to stop and think about all the junior executives at Blockbuster in 2007. The junior marketing person there may have planned to be the vice president of marketing by 2012, or similar with people who worked, say, at Kodak or CompUSA. The associate general counsel at CompUSA may have had a career plan that included becoming GC, but that didn't quite happen. And it's not just these big corporations. Major changes in journalism, in real estate, in banking, and other industries have resulted in huge shifts for millions of workers. But you don't have to be at today's equivalent of Blockbuster for a traditional career plan to not work for you. You've probably seen those statistics that say that 3, 5, or the average American will switch jobs 3, 5, or 7 times throughout their career. But I recently read some research that says that those numbers are not really based on anything real, and that more accurate research shows that it's at least 11 times in your career the average American will switch jobs. So regardless of where you work, it's likely that you're going to have some major career shifts that make a traditional career plan pretty impractical and unhelpful. In addition to the careers that don't exist anymore, that used to, there are a lot of new careers today that we didn't know existed many years ago. In my own case, I didn't know that career coaching was even a thing until about 5 years ago, and that's now my full-time job. In addition, you think about other careers too, like there are a lot of attorneys now who are focusing on cannabis law. Well, that wasn't something that anyone thought existed 10 years ago. Or all the people who are building careers in data privacy, which was not a real concern 10 years ago. So it's not just that jobs today may not exist in the future, it's also that new jobs will exist in the future that we can't even imagine. The second principle I want to share as a foundation for our discussion today is that it's never a bad time to focus on your career. No one has ever thought, oh gee, I wish I hadn't worked on advancing my Excel skills, or I wish I hadn't gotten better at sales. So whether you're just starting out in your career, or if you're starting to think about when you want to retire and what you want to do with your retirement, it doesn't matter. Either way, it's still a good time to spend time thinking about your career and where you want to go. The third principle I want to share with you is that you don't need to know your final destination or your route to be able to enhance the skills in your career toolbox. So even if you're listening to this thinking, I have no idea where I want to be in 5 years, first of all, we're going to share some tools to help you figure that out. But secondly, it's okay. You don't have to have this all figured out right now. And there's still things that you can do today to help your career. Fourth is career planning is not a one-time event. This is not something that you should do even just once a year. I really encourage people to take time quarterly to stop and reflect on their career and block off an afternoon, which I know can be tricky, but it's absolutely worth it and it will pay off. So I want to encourage you to not think of this as something that you're going to sit down, put in a drawer, and then go back to years from now. This really is an ongoing process. I also want to encourage you to focus on what you can control. You can't control the economy. You cannot control if the boss that you love and who supports your development leaves and you end up with someone who is the opposite. You can't control if all of a sudden you need to move to new geographic area. What you can focus on is on developing transferable skills that will be useful to you in a variety of settings. And sixth, I encourage you to know your why and to know what truly makes you happy, because understanding why you're doing this and why you have the career that you want or why you're going after the job that you're going after will help you to stay focused and also make it all worthwhile. So the seventh principle, I told you there are 7 principles I wanted to share with you today. I'll share the 7th one with you a little bit later. So to recap those 7 career planning principles. First, a traditional career plan just doesn't work today. Second, it's never a bad time to focus on your career. Third, you don't need to know your final destination or your route to be able to enhance the skills in your career toolbox. Fourth, career planning is not a one-time event. Fifth, I want to encourage you to focus on what you can control. And sixth, know your why and know what truly makes you happy. And then we'll share the 7th shortly. So instead of a career plan, I want to encourage you to build a map for your career journey, because I found that terminology can be a lot more helpful for people, because you can end up in one of many places and be happy in that place. And any route that gets you there is fine, right? So there are lots of different ways to get to the same destination, and some may detour more than others, but that just makes them more scenic. So I want to encourage you to think about it as a map rather than a career plan. So how do you come up with this career map? So I've come up with 9 steps to share with you today. And the first one is to assess yourself, because it's not really helpful to think about what other people think you should be doing with your career or where you should be at a certain stage in your life. It's a lot more helpful to think about how you're feeling about it. So the first step of a self-assessment is to start with your values and ask yourself what matters to you. I encourage you to ask yourself actually to go beyond that. So not just one of the things you value maybe is working with colleagues you like. That's great, but then ask yourself why. Why does that matter to you? And push yourself to go deeper, to get a deeper understanding of those values and what really is important to you, because that's going to be so helpful as you think about where you want your career to go. So start with your values, then move on to your personality. Think about what feeds your energy and what motivates you, because if you have this ideal of a career and a place you want to end up, but haven't taken into account what really feeds you and how you feel about it, it's not going to, in the end, make you happy anyway. So think about your personality. Third, consider your interests and what you really enjoy doing. One thing that I find really helpful with my clients is asking them to make a list of all the things that they like about their current role and all the things that they dislike about their current role. And then digging deeper into those and understanding why they dislike something. So maybe you dislike something in your current role because you're not very good at it. And if you got better at it, you would like it more. So look at those interests and consider what you actually enjoy doing. Fourth is to consider your experiences here, your experiences. And here, I think it's really important to look at what you've already done in terms of job titles, but also not just the roles, but the industries that you've worked in. I also want to encourage you to not minimize your experiences. Often I find that particularly people new in their career will say, oh, I don't have any experience at that. But that's because they're disregarding their volunteer experience, their internships, their part-time jobs from high school and college. I actually have a friend who does a lot of hiring, and he always says that he loves people who have worked in retail or in the restaurant industry, because his theory is that if you can work at Yankee Candle on Black Friday, or you can work at TGI Fridays on a busy Saturday night, you can handle just about anything. So don't neglect to consider the experiences you've had in those types of roles before you started your full-time career. Next, you want to think about your current hard skills and certifications. And what I mean by that is things like maybe you're great at financial analysis, or you're fluent in Spanish, maybe you're a certified public accountant, maybe you're a great writer. Whatever those are, you want to add those to the notes that you're taking as you're doing a self-assessment. Next, you want to look at your soft skills. Things like, are you able to build coalitions and find common ground? Maybe you are a great public speaker. Think broadly about those as well and write all of those down too. Next, you want to think about your interest in developing additional skills. And here's why this is important, because you can probably do anything, but that doesn't mean you want to. And if there's a particular requirement for a role that you think you might like to have, if you aren't interested in that, achieving that requirement, that may mean that you aren't interested in the job itself. It may mean there's a portion of the job that you're not going to enjoy. So think honestly about that. After you've done that self-assessment, the next step is to investigate. You can begin by asking others who already have a role that you think you're interested in. So ask them, what skills are needed to do well in this role? What type of people have they seen do well in this role? How did they develop the skills that they need to succeed? What do they love about the job? What type of person do they think is most likely to do well in this role? How do they see the role changing in the next 3 to 5 years? And what are the exit options for a person in this role? So don't be afraid to reach out to people through your network, through LinkedIn. The University of Chicago alumni LinkedIn groups are tremendously helpful. You can reach out to alumni from your division, your school. So don't be afraid to reach out to people, and then also people who may work at the same employer you do or other employers within the same industry. Second, you want to do some research. You can read about employers and roles. That can be helpful. One thing I think is really useful is to look on LinkedIn at job descriptions for roles that you think you want to have maybe 3 to 5 years from now. Look at what skills they're saying are recommended and what are required. And those LinkedIn job postings are especially helpful because then you're not just sitting around Googling trying to find employers. I actually have a client who has decided that she wants a particular role in about 3 years. And from reading those job descriptions, realized that she needed a certification, which is very difficult to get other than once a year. And that once a year was coming up, and it only took her 2 weekends to get the certification. But because she knew she needed it, she's now been able to get it and get it done. So she's not in a position down the road of having to wait a year until she can get that certification. Another way to research is to read books by people who've pursued paths that interest you or about particular fields. Next, talk to people who know you. What do they feel are your biggest strengths? What do they see you doing in the future? And the final step of investigating is to leverage feedback. Now we're going to take a little detour here because as I've done these webinars before, I've had a lot of questions about feedback. And working with my own clients, I often hear them say that they don't get useful feedback from their employer. So let's jump into how you can get feedback that you need to plan your career. So, and some of this is basic for those of you who feel like you're already getting good feedback, but it'll just take a second. So you want to ask for feedback close in time or proximity to the event or work that you've done. You want to ask for it privately. And if you're asking someone to sit down and give you feedback on your performance on more than, say, the last project you did, you want to make sure that you're giving them a heads up so that they can reflect and be prepared to have a substantive conversation with you. You also want to ask for feedback often. And I've found that the more often you're asking for feedback, the more likely your supervisor is to start proactively giving it to you. Now, I often hear from people, they don't know what to say or how to ask for feedback. So I'm going to share 5 quick strategies and things that you can actually say to get the feedback you need from your supervisor so that you can incorporate that into your career map. So the first strategy is to give yourself negative feedback first. So an example of doing that would be to say something like, I know I tend to speak quickly and I sometimes don't sense when others would like to speak. I'd like to get better at that. Do you have any thoughts on how I could improve? And then when your supervisor answers, you want to say, and what else could I be doing to improve right now? So you're making it clear that you are keeping an open mind about what else you can work on. You recognize everyone has room to improve. The second strategy is make the feedback part of an overall commitment to professional development. And you're in a great position to use this one because you can say, I've been thinking about my long-term career development. I just watched a webinar on career planning. And I've made a commitment to improve in 3 specific areas over the next quarter. I'd appreciate any thoughts you might have on what those areas should be. And after you've heard your supervisor's feedback, you can say something like, I'd be grateful if you'd help me keep my commitment to improve in X area. So in that way, you are making it clear that you take your career seriously. You're asking your supervisor to partner with you and help you in growing in it, and you're asking for her input. Strategy 3 is to reframe negative feedback to focus on the learning opportunity. Often supervisors are reluctant to offer negative feedback. We actually do a training for employers where we train supervisors to give feedback, and we hear all the time that supervisors don't want to give constructive feedback because they're afraid that the recipient will yell or cry or be upset. So if your supervisor falls into that camp, just ask, what is something you think I could learn from this project? Or what is something you think I could learn from you? And so you're making it very clear that you are focused on the learning piece of this and you're not going to overreact. Another way to avoid their concern that you might overreact is to minimize the impact of negative feedback proactively. So there you could say something like, if I could change one small thing about how I handle this type of assignment, what should it be? And so again, you're minimizing the negative impact, you're making it clear you're focused on improving, and hopefully that's making them more willing to give you helpful feedback. And then the 5th strategy, probably the easiest to incorporate, is to dig into compliments. I hear from a lot of people that the only feedback they get is, oh, you did a great job, everything's fine. When you get that feedback, ask for details. Say something like, thank you, can I ask if there was anything specific that stood out in what I did on the project? Then, if they can give you anything helpful there, you ask, what should I do differently next time? And I like the what should language because it just assumes that of course there's something you can do differently next time. There's always something you can improve. And so that can be a really easy way to get the feedback that you need that's going to help you as you work on your career map. So let's jump back. So you've already done your self-assessment, you've done your investigation. The 3rd step to a career map is to go back to your self-assessment and look at what you came up with and whether what you found in your investigation makes a particular career or role a good fit for you based on your self-assessment. And you may need to repeat that process a couple of times if you find that something you thought sounded really appealing actually isn't a good match for you. The next step is prioritize the options. So using your self-assessment and your research, consider what makes the most sense for you. As I said before, I really believe there's no one perfect job for each person. There are probably many things you could do with your career and be happy. So think about how you want to prioritize that. Next, I encourage you to decide on a range of options that you want to pursue. So I think it can be really unhelpful if people focus on one particular role in one particular setting, because you never know what's going to happen. And, back to that Blockbuster example, it wouldn't have been helpful to have a goal of being, the vice president of sales for Blockbuster by a certain date. It would have been helpful to have a goal of being the vice president of sales for, a company with franchises across the country. Say. So think broadly about a range of options that you want to pursue. Next, reflect on the options you've identified. So this isn't a one afternoon project. Give yourself time to sleep on it and think about it a little more. And so you have time to reflect, and so you don't just go charging off pursuing options that after further reflection may not be the right fit. Step 7, focus on the next step jobs. So I often see that people focus on, I want to get to this particular role, and they forget that there are going to be steps along the way often to get there. There might be 2 steps, 2 different jobs that you need to have before you're ready for that particular role. I also want to encourage you to think about lateral moves. So I think that it's more appealing to just assume that you're going to rocket straight up. But if you consider whether it might be more helpful for you to gain experience at another company, maybe a competitor, maybe a company in a different industry, or maybe you are a small fish in a big pond and you want to be a big fish in a small pond, or vice versa. So consider lateral moves and whether that might make sense for you. Now, step 8 is determine the skills that you need for these next step jobs. I really want to encourage you to focus on transferable skills. So skills like writing, analysis, quantitative skills, self-awareness, executive presence, emotional intelligence, communication, relationship building skills, including networking, and managing up, down, and laterally are all skills that are very transferable. and that you can use in a variety of settings. Once you've come up with those skills that you want to focus on, I encourage you to set written, smarter goals for your growth. And it is so important to write these goals down. There's actually research, a professor at Dominican University in California found that you are 42% more likely to achieve your goals when you write them down on a regular basis. And there are even studies that show that writing down your goals means that you're going to be more likely to make more money. So I really encourage you to write these down. And I like the SMARTER framework because I think it helps you tap into better goals rather than the SMART framework that you're probably more familiar with. So I encourage you to make written goals that are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time-bound, and risky or challenging. If it's something that you can do in an afternoon, it's not really worth a goal. That's more something that you should put on your to-do list and get done. So some tips to help you achieve those career goals. So again, you want to go back to your why and why you're pursuing this career path or why you're pursuing this job. I encourage you to limit yourself to 1 to 3 goals per quarter, and I know that that can be really hard. The way I finally broke myself of the bad habit of setting too many goals per quarter was realizing that if I can achieve 3 goals a quarter, it's still 12 a year, and that I'm better off doing that than reaching 10% each on 10 different goals every quarter. I also want to encourage you to focus on the next step. So when you set a goal, don't assume that you can only have that as a goal if you figured out every single step to reach the goal. I found time and again that when I set a goal and all I know is the next step, somehow the resources and things that I need to achieve the goal will appear, whether it's because I run into someone at a coffee who just achieved that goal and can give me tips, or I happen to see an ad for a seminar or something that's going to help me achieve that goal. So focus on the next step and don't pressure yourself to come up with every single detail of your plan. Reviewing your goals regularly, ideally daily, but at least weekly, is also really important to keep focused on them and to encourage you to keep moving forward. And I also want to remind you that you're not in this alone. So there are a lot of resources that you can tap into, whether that's maybe your office mate is going to be an accountability buddy for you. And if your goal is to speak up more in meetings, maybe your office mate can let you know after a meeting how well you did or give you encouragement. Maybe you want to work with your spouse or significant other on your goals. Maybe you want to hire a coach. Maybe you want to enlist your supervisor, as in some of the feedback examples. Whatever it is, remember that you're not in it alone, and find those supports as you're going through this. On the flip side, I want to share some advice from one of my mentors, which is that no one will ever care more about your career than you do. And you may have a wonderful supervisor who really cares about your career, but that is not going to be their number one concern because they're worried about their own career and the careers of other people they supervise. So if you don't take the ownership to come up with a career map, to figure out what skills you want to focus on so that you can grow and improve, no one is ever going to come to you and tell you to do it. So to recap those 9 steps to a career map, assess yourself, investigate, including gathering feedback, then go back to that self-assessment, prioritize the options, decide on a range of options that you want to pursue, reflect on those options you've identified, focus on the next step jobs so that you can maintain your momentum, and determine the skills you need for those next steps, and set written, smarter goals to help you gain and develop the skills that you'll need. Now, I'm sure that many of you are thinking, now that's great, I'm going to write this goal, whatever, how am I actually going to achieve it? So here are some tips for how you can actually start developing these transferable skills. The first is ask. Ask those who have the skills that you want to develop how they got them. It's a compliment to go to someone and say, I really admire the way that you handle conflict in these tense negotiations. How did you learn to do that? And see what they say. You can also ask someone who has a skill that you want to develop to mentor you. And ask your supervisor or HR department what resources they may have, because they may have online courses that you can do or classes that are open to people that are picked for certain leadership programs that once you ask about them, then they'll start to consider you for those as well. A second way to learn and grow is through books, particularly books on specific skills. I also find that memoirs are really helpful. So for example, I was trying to learn more about negotiation for a program that we do on negotiation. And one of the books that I read was Wendy Sherman's book on negotiation. She used to be a negotiator for the US, negotiating with foreign countries. And so that book was actually really helpful. So don't limit yourself just to books on specific skills. And we'll have in a little bit, I'll talk to you about a book bundle that we'll give away to one of the participants today that has some books on career growth that might be helpful. And you can also pick those up yourself. A third way to learn and grow is coaching. We have clients who start with, I know I want to make partner my law firm, or I know I want to be the chief resident at my hospital. And then we have other people who come to us and say, I don't know where to start. Whatever it is, wherever you are, you might think about whether a coaching, maybe through your firm organization or working with a coach on your own, would be helpful. A second type of coaching that I've found very helpful personally is a mastermind, where you work with a group of people with a similar career goal who are also working with a coach, and that way you have support, accountability, as well as coaching. We offer ones for lawyers and then for other professionals, but there's a range of options out there for masterminds if that's something you're interested in. A fourth way to learn and grow is through classes. And here, I don't just mean go get an MBA or go get a certificate in project management. It might be that watching a 2-hour webinar is going to be adequate for you. If you find that you like webinars and feel like you learn from them, the University of Chicago Alumni Association has a ton of webinars that you can watch for free. So I encourage you to check those out. You can also think about maybe an afternoon class, like a storytelling class or an improv class, or a quarter-long online class. I think it's easy to forget how many classes are online, and many of them are free or very inexpensive. So think about that as well as a way to learn and grow. Another way is to take on a challenge. I think this can be really useful to take on a challenge that has nothing to do with your career on the surface. So maybe you've never run before and you want to run a 5K, or maybe your kid is in karate and you've never taken karate, but you're going to start taking a beginner's class. I have a good friend who started taking ballet at the age of 25. Don't assume that it's too late to do some of these things that you always wanted to do when you were a kid. And don't assume that they're just extracurricular. These types of activities can really help in your career because they make you more well-rounded. It can help you develop the soft skills you need to advance, like your grit. It can help you approach problems with a beginner's mind, and it makes you more interesting. So think about taking on a challenge that may not be connected directly to your career. 6, let others know that you're open to learning and growing. Here I'm specifically thinking about maybe there are conferences where your boss is to nominate someone to attend, but if they don't think that you're interested, then they're never going to think of you. Or there might be an opportunity at your job to do a secondment to a client, or maybe even an overseas assignment, which can be a huge help in your career growth. So it's important to let folks know that you are not just putting your head down and doing a good job, but you're really interested in growing and learning. 7th is a tip that I think adults often don't think about, which is shadowing. Now this can be a little tricky, but it is completely possible to take a day off work, or maybe even a week, and go spend it with someone who's doing the job you think you want to do someday. It's sort of like making your own internship. And it might be that you spend a day with your boss's boss, or it might be someone in an entirely different organization. I think you'd be surprised how many people are open to that if you contact them and say, maybe you go to coffee with them first, but then you say, is there any chance I could ever tag along with you for a day and just see what it's like to do this job? And that can be a great opportunity. So don't assume that because you didn't maybe you didn't get to do a Metcalf externship in college, you can still shadow someone else now. The 8th way to learn and grow is look for opportunities outside work. So I already mentioned some of the extracurricular suggestions, but things like volunteer committees. So your alumni club needs volunteers. There might be other organizations you're interested in. And those volunteer assignments can give you the chance to develop the skills that you need to succeed in your career in an environment where you're not being evaluated by your supervisor. Another way to do this is through professional organizations. I have a friend who wanted to make a shift into professional fundraising. And the way she did it was by becoming the chair of the fundraising committee for her professional organization. She learned how to do all different types of fundraising and then used that to make a career change into fundraising. Another way is through pro bono work, and this obviously isn't just limited to lawyers. Plenty of industries provide opportunities to use your skills to benefit a nonprofit, say. In my own case, I did a trial in Cook County State Court in front of a judge, and it was representing a pro bono client, actually a 5-year-old little girl who I was assigned to represent. And because I had done that trial experience, then when my law firm had a paying client with a big case going to trial, I ended up second chairing an $18 million jury trial, all because I had done that pro bono trial under very different circumstances. So there are lots of reasons that you should do, volunteer work and pro bono work, but one of them can be that it benefits your career. Another way to look for opportunities outside work is to build your network, both within and outside your industry, because that's how you're going to meet people who inspire you and learn more about jobs that might be a good fit for you. And those are the folks who might be able to help you down the road. And the 9th way to learn and grow is to keep your new skills sharp by looking for opportunities to apply them. If you go into a job interview and they say, one of the requirements is you have to be great at Excel, and you say, I have this certification, that's great. But you're going to be better off if you can give an example of how you've recently used it. And that can again be through some of these volunteer activities or things like that. So actively seek out ways to develop the skills and then to continue to apply them. So one of the examples actually of a webinar that you might want to check out is one that I did for the Alumni Association called Developing Your Leadership Skills as a New Professional, particularly if skills that you want to work on include self-awareness, executive presence, and communication. So that's one of the webinars that I mentioned earlier that might be helpful to you. So it is, I think we've all done webinars where you leave and you have this list of things that you should do, and then maybe it happens or maybe it doesn't. But today that's not going to happen. So we're going to give you a chance to set a written smarter goal for yourself and to take the first step to achieve it. So let me explain what I mean. So remember we talked about smarter goals being specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time-bound, and risky or challenging. Now, I want to encourage you to keep in mind this goal that you set for yourself today can evolve over time. You're just getting started. We're not asking you to write anything in blood. So I want to encourage you though to use this 3 minutes coming up here to work on a smarter goal for your growth. So here's an example of what I mean. Your goal should not be, I'm going to become a better writer. It should be, by March 30th, 2020, I'm going to complete a writing class on business writing. And then the one step you take is maybe you Google writing class in your city or email HR and ask for suggestions. Another way to do this might be to say, beginning November 15th, I'm going to journal 5 minutes every weekday on the way to work. And so you could take as a step, setting an alarm right now in your phone to go off every morning at the time when you get on the bus to remind you to journal. Or you could order a journal or download an app. And finally, a third example would be to say through December 31st, I'm going to ask for feedback every 5 days or within 5 days, every time I submit any written work longer than 1 page. And your one step that you take right now might be to decide on a trigger. Maybe that's when you put a due date in your calendar, you automatically put in a reminder to ask for feedback. So hopefully those gives you some ideas to get yourself going. More than half of this quarter is left too, so I encourage you to not just think about January. I encourage you to think about what you might be able to do yet this quarter. So you're going to have 3 minutes on the clock. It's going to count down, and you'll have 3 minutes to set a smarter growth and complete the first step. When you're done, I want to encourage you to share in the chat what your goal is that you've set and what you've just done to move forward on it. So with that, let's start with 3 minutes. All right, we have 15 seconds left. If you haven't, please go ahead and paste in the chat what your goal is and the first step that you've taken. All right, Adam, do you want to share what a couple of folks have shared as their goal and their first step?
Absolutely, yeah, we have several great examples that have rolled in here, so excited to share with you. So let's see, we had one attendee share that they would like to sketch, doodle, or draw for at least 3 times a week for 15 minutes to keep up and build on art, drawing, and calligraphy skills. We have another attendee who said by November 30th, a nice time-bound goal, I will make a list of all the things I like and dislike about my current job and why. And as a first step, I will set a calendar appointment to spend 30 minutes on this task next Monday.
Wonderful, that's great.
Yeah, another attendee that has a goal to decide on a name/brand for a potential business. I think we have time for a couple more. Lots of good ones here. Complete self-assessment and learn to code in Python to add a concrete skill. Ordered StrengthsFinders 2.0 and is learning to code from a book.
Great.
Let's see, maybe 1 or 2 more examples here. Another attendee wrote as a goal, schedule a recurring coffee for starting in the next 2 weeks with 2 senior executives at my company to ask them about how they developed their executive presence and ask them for future networking and leading and learning coffees. And then the step taken would be created a task to reach out to executive assistants for 2 specific executives to get that first coffee scheduled.
Great.
And yeah, let's do one more here. Identify 2 more people in the industry I want to go into who live within 75 miles and who might be willing to mentor me.
Excellent. Those are all wonderful. So for the person who mentioned executive presence, I want to encourage you to check out that webinar I mentioned before, the leadership skills for new professionals. And if you go to apochromatic.com and click on the blog and then search executive, you'll find we have some videos on executive presence and we've recommended some books on executive presence. So there's some resources there that you might find helpful as well. But that's wonderful. So I hope that one of the takeaways from this exercise is not just that you have a goal and that you're working towards it, but also that we often make these goals out to be so complicated in our heads. And if you give yourself 5 minutes to make progress on a goal, it's amazing how much progress you can make. So you had 3 minutes on the clock, came up with some great goals, and many of you took the first step toward them. So it is not a case where you have to say, oh, I must have 1 day a month to sit and work on goals, because who has 1 day a month to sit and work on goals? If you do, congratulations. But for the rest of us, thinking about where do you have these snippets of time? Maybe you can start reading a book on your Kindle on the L, on one of these skills that you want to develop, or start sketching on the L, whatever it is, to try to start finding time to work on your goals. It's so important. So thank you all to those of you who shared. So before I said that I would come back to the 7th principle of career planning later, so now is later. The 7th principle is that a career map is not a contract. So I want to encourage you to be open to new possibilities. Don't dismiss opportunities out of hand because you don't think that they fit within where you want your career to go or expect your career to go. And don't let having a career map give you a false sense of confidence that you should turn down opportunities that don't seem on their face to fit. Just because you pick, say, 3 skill areas to work on doesn't mean you're automatically going to get the advancement or role that you want. So continue to be open to other skills and to feedback you receive about other skills that you might want to work on. Now, you've already taken some steps today, which is wonderful, but here's a few more that you can take today. First, update your resume. Having an updated resume, we have a service actually called Resume Redo where we help people just with their resumes. No career coaching, just resumes. It is amazing how much more confident people feel knowing that they have their resume ready. So take a few minutes to update your resume. It helps you see what you've already accomplished. It may help you identify some things that you've liked and that you've had opportunities to do and enjoyed, and things that you're glad you got done, and helps you get a more accurate picture of what you've been doing in your career so far. It also helps too, because if you're having, say, a networking coffee, as a couple of the goals said, then when somebody says, oh, send me your resume, you can do that. And an ancillary to that is to update your LinkedIn. You can also take the next step on the goal you just set. So maybe you put in a reminder in your calendar to sketch, say, but now you realize, wait, I think I need some new pencils. Order them. Take whatever the next step is to keep going forward. Another thing you can do right now is schedule time today to make a career map each quarter. Somebody had that already as their goal, which is great. And as I mentioned, half of this quarter still remains. So there's still time this quarter to work on this. Put a calendar block for a couple hours and make it right now, an appointment now, as well as say one in January or February. So put those in your calendar now, because as we know, what gets scheduled gets done. So do that scheduling today. Another thing you can do today is start keeping track of your achievements. That can be done lots of different ways. Maybe you have a spreadsheet of compliments. Maybe you have a note in your phone. Anytime someone tells you something that you did that was great, or you achieved something, you put it in that note. Maybe you have a document in Evernote. I have a yay me file in my emails, where when clients email me and say, I just had a client with a job interview today who sent me an email that said she would not have been prepared without my help. I responded and then immediately saved that in the yay me file in my email. So do those sorts of things to help you reflect on your strengths, and also to keep yourself encouraged as you progress throughout your career. Now, I mentioned before about how books can be a really helpful way to learn new skills, or one aspect of learning a new skill. So we have put together a bundle of 3 books on careers that you might find helpful. If you go to applesignup.com/maroon2, you can register to win one of those. I know a lot of people are going to be watching on the replay, so we'll do the drawing for that book bundle at the end of November. So you have time to do that. But if you're watching now, go ahead and sign up there, and then you'll have the chance to win that book bundle. And you can see also 3 books that we suggest. Now, today we talked about career planning principles, some steps to build your career map, 8 ways to learn and grow. And we talked about how to jumpstart your career map and your career growth, and then some first steps to do that. So with that, I'm happy to take questions. And as I mentioned before, I know that there are some times where you don't want to ask a question in front of a few hundred people on a webinar. You can always email me, and I'm happy to take your questions by email as well. And I encourage you to connect to me on LinkedIn too, if you want to get more career articles and career information that I share on LinkedIn each week. So with that, Adam, are there any questions?
Yes, absolutely. And I want to just make a quick note to let everyone know that I'll link in the post email I'll be sending later this afternoon. I'll link to that other webinar that you recommended on leadership skills.
Thank you.
And yeah, so that hopefully will be helpful for folks.
Good. And to be clear, there are tons of other great webinars on there. It's just I happen to have done that one, so I know that what it talks about. So there are lots of other
yeah,
good ones.
absolutely. And yeah, and I'll also share a link, and would encourage all those attending to just check out our YouTube channel, which has webinars on executive presence, on a lot of these topics that we've been discussing. So so look for that in the post email, in addition to the recording of this webinar. But yes, so a couple of questions. We had one audience member write in: I've been in a career place for more than 10 years now, and I am completely unhappy. And being that unhappy shows itself in my interactions at work and at home. That negativity is a big block. How do I overcome it without just walking into unemployment?
I've heard this question a lot, where your job is sort of beating you down and it's impacting every other part of your life. I actually have a client who recently came to Chicago to take my husband, with his wife, to take my husband and me to dinner. And he did it, he said, because working with us, because we'd done a lot together, it had changed every aspect of his life. He said that he started off despondent and angry and frustrated at work. And now that he's in a job he actually loves, everything is better. He's lost weight, he's exercising, he has a better relationship with his kids, he and his wife are getting along a lot better. So I don't want to minimize what you're experiencing. That's very normal. If a big part of your life is unhappy, it's going to show itself in other parts as well. In my client's case, what he did was he started to take ownership of his career and start reflecting on doing a lot of that self-assessment. We worked together a lot on his values and the things that he had learned in his job that he would be taking to another one, what he liked in his current job, what he didn't, so that we made sure he didn't repeat, have those same qualities in the next job. And that just taking action was really helpful for him, because once he started to take ownership and felt more in control, he was less frustrated. And so that can be helpful, because I don't think it's enough to just say, oh, when you get in your next job, it'll all be better. Because those relationships that you're damaging right now will need repair. I encourage you to not minimize what it's doing to you and to take time for self-care. That particular client found meditation really helpful in just a few minutes a day. It was really useful in helping him to put more distance between the thing that happened and his response to the thing that happened, because he was experiencing so much frustration and anger, and was having trouble then communicating professionally at work and then also at home. So I think really taking control, recognizing that it's difficult, and taking care of yourself, and remembering that if you're showing up to interview the way that you're coming across at work right now, you're not going to end up in a better situation. So even if you can't think about how to enhance your current job now, do it, because it'll make you better off in terms of interviewing and getting the next job. But I know many of us have been there, and I certainly empathize and want to just encourage you to keep going and to understand that you deserve a better work situation, and to take control and work towards it.
Great, thanks. I know that you shared an anecdote that I really enjoyed. I think others did as well, about the friend who shared the example of somebody who's worked at Friday or Saturday night at TGI Fridays, or done a Black Friday in retail. Having that being valuable experience for a potential employer. We had a question from an audience member. For those who are mid-career, does it matter to hiring officials if this experience is a couple of decades old? How effective is it sort of reaching far back if you are a little bit farther along in your?
So one thing I think you can do is to update those skills a little. So for example, I spent a summer in college working at Houlihan's restaurant in the Wisconsin Dells, which was a big learning opportunity. So for me, if I was interviewing, say, to work for a big restaurant group now in their legal department, it might be helpful for me to volunteer, say if my kid is playing basketball, and there's always parents that are needed to work in the concession stand. Maybe I would go back and start volunteering there a few hours, so that I could talk about my customer service skills and experience in working in food service or something. So I think those skills are still relevant, but it's helpful if you can update them, and that can be through volunteer work now.
Great. I think we have time for maybe just one or two more questions. We have one audience member who left a job that they liked because of an abusive boss. The person is finding it difficult to think about the next job because of these bad memories from this previous work experience. Any suggestions on how this person can sort of cleanse their mind of these negative associations created by these experiences, and move forward effectively?
So I would consider, first of all, whether some mental health assistance might be useful in helping you process what you've gone through. Certainly, if you said, I had an abusive spouse, there would be no hesitation in saying, oh, you should talk to someone about that. I think with an abusive boss, it's similar in that talking to someone a few times may really be helpful in allowing you to process and identify what happened, and to start to understand it is not your fault. Because if you go into future interviews and work situations not having accepted that and processed it, the patterns will pop up again, and it'll just make it that much harder for you. So I would encourage you to seek support, and to understand that this is also not an uncommon situation. And in the meantime, if you need to get a sort of a bridge job before you're ready to start looking for the right career, or the next step in your career, I would encourage you to do that, maybe as an attempt situation, or doing contract work or freelance work, before you put yourself back into another situation with a supervisor. I would encourage you to process that and work on all of it.
Great. Let's end with one last question. And we have an attendee who writes that they're currently working a part-time retail job in addition to the regular job to make ends meet. This person was advised to leave that part-time retail job off the resume. It sounds like based on some of the advice that you've shared that maybe they should keep it on the resume. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think it depends how you are able to tie it into what you're doing. So one thing I want to encourage you to think about, if you can negotiate your salary so that this second job would not be so necessary, so that you could really focus on your full-time career. And maybe the way that you're trying to do that is to get a better paying job. In that case, I think that I actually was quoted in an article that's on the Apochromatic media page, where a number of career coaches were cited about whether you should include your side hustle on your resume. I think if you can tie it in, it's better to include it because it shows your dedication. It shows that you're not sitting around eating bonbons at night. You're going out to another job, and you're not going to a job, it sounds like, that's particularly easy. So if you can tie the skills that you're learning and using to the next job, I would include it. But resumes can be so person specific that you feel free to email me, and I'm happy to hop on the phone and talk with you about your situation a little bit more in case that's helpful.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Amy. Thank you to everyone for participating. It was incredibly valuable. I hope that everyone joining us today can continue to join us throughout this week and throughout the rest of Career Month. We'll be back tomorrow from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. on retirement planning basics. So looking maybe a little farther down that career map, and so would encourage you all to, whether you're just starting out or well on your way towards retirement, we hope you'll join us and gain valuable insight into the retirement planning process. You can visit our events page at careers.uchicagoalumni.org for a full list of our most upcoming programs. Take care, everyone, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks again, Amy.
Yeah, thank you.